Hey friends, welcome back. This is Ashley with Uncommon Roots Homestead, and it is time for another garden tour. I apologize for the background noise. We are taking down a couple of trees on the homestead. I'll show you what it looks like in just a minute. But today we're going to be walking through the garden. I am in East Tennessee, Zone 7A. It is early to mid-June right now, and I want to show you what's been going on in the garden. A couple days ago, I shared some of the things that were not going well. Today, I want to walk you through the entire space. So let's do it. Okay, so today I'm gonna start actually at the back of the garden. Hopefully this gives Cousin Ed some time to get that tree down and give us a little bit more quiet as we head to the front. But I wanted to start here. This trellis, how gorgeous, for a second, come on. How gorgeous is this gonna be when it is full of food? So I had an arch trellis in our last property. It was actually one of these cattle panels as well. And I did beans over it, I did some squash, but it never, the way that our space was last year, it just never really completely filled out. So I cannot wait. I cannot wait to walk through that as just a jungle of food. How gorgeous is that gonna be? Ooh, I just had like a sneezing attack. So this bed, I talked about this extensively in my last video where we kind of went through the garden fails of 2021. But I wanted to say thank you so much. So many of you wrote into me to tell me that you think that this looks like herbicide damage. So we do live under power lines. I've made a video about that in the past. We are on a no spray list. I know that doesn't always mean that you end up being, not sprayed. But when I called last, it was a couple months ago, the gentleman I spoke to who put us on the no spray list said that our property is zoned for biannual spraying, which means every other year they'll spray. And 2021 is an off year. So I don't think it's that, something was sprayed from above or for the power lines, mostly because it's just this bed. And if you kind of look at the garden holistic, it's kind of right smack dab in the middle of the garden. So for it to be herbicide damage from something externally in the air just seems like that would be odd. Not impossible, but odd. So what I'm thinking is that potentially our compost was exposed and damaged. And now this is interesting because this bed and that bed and the pepper bed and these two squash beds, they were all the same load of compost. Now, what's interesting about that is our peppers look pretty good. They're only slightly damaged, but from what I read, peppers actually aren't as impacted by herbicide damage. The most commonly impacted are tomatoes and beans. Now, everything in that other 12-foot bed looks pretty good. Let me show you. So here you can see we have our radishes, our kale, our cut flowers. We have our carrots down the side. Then we have beans down this side. And then I had leeks, but I think I'm gonna need to replant them. And then I've got some beets and some bunching onions at the end. But what I wanna show you are these beans. So at first I thought this bed's unaffected. And then I saw the beans. So what's interesting about beans is that they're called the canary crop. So if you think that you might have compost that is damaged or impacted by herbicides, they say plant beans because they'll show the damage really quickly. So I'm kind of thinking that you guys are right and that it is damaged caused by herbicides and that my compost might have been somehow infected. Now, what's interesting is that my squash and melons in these two beds right here, I have sowed those seeds 3 times now, and they are barely coming up. And so what I'm starting to wonder is that compost bad, and it's just only impacting a portion of what I've planted? And so it wasn't immediately noticeable, right? At first, if you're not paying super close attention, it looks like just the tomatoes and the marigolds in this bed were impacted. But then when you move to the other bed and notice the beans, and then you think about how these are struggling to germinate, everything started kind of adding up for me that maybe it's a bigger problem than I thought. I also explored some other options, like, could it be that the tomatoes that are all in this bed, there are 8 tomatoes. These were not starts that I started personally. I bought these at a local nursery. So part of me thought, like, maybe they were exposed to something at the nursery, and then I just brought them home and they brought it back here. But that doesn't explain why the beans are showing up and showing the same type of damage. So I'm starting to think that, first of all, thank you guys. Thank you for jumping on it. The whole reason that I want to be here sharing is to help each other, right? If I can help you navigate some things, if I can help you draw inspiration from what I'm doing in my potager garden, and then you guys can reach back out across the screen and offer me advice and help. Like, that's the whole beauty of this, like, symbiotic relationship that we have. So I really appreciate it. So thank you, all of you who reached out with your suggestions and things that you think it could be. I really appreciate it. And what I'm going to do is reach out to our local extension office at the university that's near us. And I'm going to see if they'll run some like tox samples of the soil so that we can see just, what exactly is in our soil, and is it something that we should be concerned about. Luckily, it's not all of our beds, but I think it's something that would be helpful and a learning experiment for you guys. And the other thing that I want to do is actually take one of these tomato plants that's in the impacted soil and put it into a different bed and see if the growth reverses itself. So a couple of you suggested that. I think it's a great idea. I think it'll be a really cool learning experiment, and that's what we're here for, right? We're just learning. So I'm going to go ahead and try that, and I'll bring you with me when I do. I'll probably do it next week or maybe the week after. So here you can see that my summer squash and my zucchini is starting to come up, and then we transition into the melons. These are watermelons. And then it looks like some of the seeds that I just sowed are starting to pop up. So that's comforting to me. It looks like a lot of them are starting to pop up here. So hopefully this will be full soon. Looks like someone's been digging, so probably no seeds there. But overall, it's looking decent. And then my sweet potatoes, I told you guys this before, but look at those. Look how they've taken off. I had all but counted them dead. That's what you get. That's what you get for losing hope. And then I've got a bunch of sunflowers planted here. So that's a sunflower. Those are sunflowers. Those are not sunflowers. Those, I think, are weeds. But for now, I'm just letting everything grow, and then I'll take care of them once the sunflowers fully pop up. And it looks like I'm getting some germination now. So we're coming out of about 4 weeks of drought, and we've been getting rain. So it is hot, it is humid. We've been getting like maybe an hour of light rain every day, but it's just the air is so heavy. But that's great for my seeds that didn't germinate during the heat. So a lot of them are starting to pop up now. So I was trying to be patient, because when it's high heat and you're only watering once a day, and for a period of that time we didn't even have water here in the garden, there's no way that you can expect to have all of your seeds germinate. But the good thing is it's kind of like you just stored them outside, so they'll have a lower germination rate. But if seeds have been in dry soil, once you make that soil wet, they usually will sprout. The exception of that would be if it like rained or you've been watering and then you stop, because then you can deal with like rot. But for the most part, I think a lot of these seeds are going to start popping up now that it's been a little bit more moist, and we've had, and that is a horrible word. I know you guys are probably going to be like, please stop saying that. But now that we've had a little bit more precipitation, I'm guessing that a lot of my seeds that hadn't germinated will start to germinate now. So something else that's interesting, this was going to be kind of my version of the Three Sisters garden. I've got corn, and then I had planted purple runner beans, purple potted runner beads down the middle. But what's funny is that most of the corn didn't germinate. Like I just have a little bit of that corn that germinated, and lots of the beans germinated. So I'm gonna have to figure out what I want to do there, if I want to support them in another way or just wait and see if the corn will grow. The reason that you do corn, beans, and squash together is that the corn grows nice and tall, which allows a trellis, a natural trellis, for the beans to run up, and then the squash covers the ground, so it provides that like mulching or ground cover to keep everything, you know, in a position where it retains water and to keep the weed pressure down. So it creates a really like harmonious relationship between those three plants. I didn't plant squash in this because I have squash right next to it. So I figured those are gonna trail. I mean, in a month, I'm not even gonna be able to walk down this row. This is just gonna be a sea of green. And so I figured that would kind of fill in the gaps with that third sister. But for now it looks like 1.5 sisters, so we will see how that pans out. So also, as I was looking this way at my sad tomatoes and my happy Tramontino squash, that looks really good. He's gonna start climbing. I noticed that I have an eggplant. He's actually setting fruit. So that is super exciting to me. I have never successfully grown eggplant, which I didn't know. I don't know if eggplant is particularly difficult to grow, but it has been for me. And it's either been that I've been too late to the game and just not gotten it in the ground soon enough, or that I, put it in an area that didn't get enough sun. I also tried in a container once. I've never successfully grown eggplant, and that is my first eggplant that is growing. Now, unfortunately, it's in this bed with everything that doesn't look good. So I'm hoping that this plant kind of pulls through, because the other eggplant looks pretty sick. So look at how he's curling up. I think you guys are right. This is definitely at the soil level, and it might be herbicide damage. It's just so odd to me that these lower leaves, even on the tomatoes, the lower leaves look good. And then you get to this new growth up top, and it is just hard and crusty. Not good. Also, we've started getting strawberries, and I walked over into the garage to grab a water and pick one, and then I dropped it. It's not in the best shape. I'll probably take it over to the chickens. So while I'm over here, I wanted to take a look at this herb bed. So I have never had a dedicated herb bed. I've had space for herbs or containers for herbs, but I've never had a dedicated herb bed. I am obsessed with these tiered planters. Everything is coming up so beautifully. It's so lush and full, and the thought to me that these are gonna come back every year, even the annuals here, I'm letting them go to seed. They're gonna reseed. I am just enamored by the thought of an herb bed. So if you have not put an herb bed into your garden and you have any bit of space, I recommend it. Even if it's just one container that you dedicate to herbs, it's so fragrant. You walk by and just are overcome with the presence of these herbs. Highly, highly, highly recommend. I mean, this dill, it is so fragrant. It is just, it's almost so fragrant that it smells floral. If you have never experienced fresh dill, that might not make sense to you, but it's so strong that it almost jumps past that dill or pickle type of scent. It's funny because we call it it smells like pickles, but really it just smells like dill. And it jumps into this deep floral. It's just absolutely wonderful. Also, look at this holy basil starting to come up. That's Tulsi. It already smells delicious. And then all this lavender, it just looks fantastic. This is just gonna explode. Look at all these little lavender plants. I started these from seed. I'm so proud of that. My sage is out of control. So is the thyme, chamomile, mint. So some people will say don't put mint with anything else in the garden. Don't even put it in the garden because you'll never get rid of it. I like to put mint with other varieties that like to take over a space. So chamomile and thyme both like to kind of carpet and take over a space. So I put that right next to the mint. And what I'll do is I'll control, it's like a controlled burn. I'm going to control the borders and make sure it stays relatively close. But for the most part, I'm gonna let it do its thing, and they should keep each other in check. Also, total side note to the garden tour, but I was supposed to milk Jeannie tonight because I didn't milk her yesterday morning, and I just looked over to see the calf nursing, which means I've missed my milking window. Kind of see her down there. Calf is on the other side. So another thing that I really need to do is get on top of these weeds. So see a weed, pull a weed. Unless you're like me and doing a garden tour and seeing hundreds of weeds, I'm gonna have to come out and spend a whole day just pulling these weeds. I think that what Kevin is gonna do is actually bring in some more cardboard and reline these paths and do cardboard and mulch again. Just the weeds, the Bermuda grass just came back ferociously. Look at this grass. It's out of control. All right, so you all should be proud of me. Last garden tour, I had no tomatoes pruned and no tomatoes trellised. This garden tour, I have all tomatoes trellised and most tomatoes pruned. So all of the tomatoes back here and in those beds, those are all pruned. The only ones I haven't pruned are these two here, but they are trellised. So I'm gonna take that as a win. We went ahead and again did the field fence trellising. This is just something that we had, and so we decided to use it, and it'll be pretty easy to move at the end of the season as well. These tomatoes still need to be pruned. You can see they're getting really jungly, but still super healthy. Starting to see a little bit of disease here at the bottom. That's really common, especially because I haven't pruned them. So I'm gonna come in and get these pruned probably later today. These tomatillos though look fantastic, and look at all of these flowers. We're gonna have so many tomatillos. Also look at those tomatoes. I really need to get in here and prune because they're setting so much fruit, and I hate to cut off limbs with fruit. I'm gonna have to. But also, we weren't sure how my artichokes were gonna do, and they look fantastic. They're coming up really nicely. I don't have any concerns about them. And then look at all these dahlias popping up. I'm hoping I'm gonna have some flowers soon. Can we just appreciate this basil? Look at that. Ah, so fragrant. So let's talk about our pepper bed. So our peppers are interesting this year. They're like 50-50, doing well, and then not. Like something topped this. What the heck? What did this to my pepper? Oh, gonna guess that was a cayenne. Literally, something just ripped the top right off. Look at that. Just completely topped. Overall, though, this bed looks really good. It looks really healthy, which is, again, confusing because it's the same compost that was in those other beds. But, you know, every type of fruit or veggie is going to respond differently to different environmental things. So whether it's some kind of a deficiency that the soil has or some kind of an herbicide that it was exposed to, I would expect all of the different types of plants to respond differently. So that's not as concerning to me, but it's just so odd. I'm gonna have to send the soil sample because I can't not know. Asparagus is all looking pretty good. We have the couple of dead plants here that I showed you guys in the last video, but we went ahead and put some Boston pickling cucumbers on this trellis. So those will climb over nicely. And I haven't planted anything on the other side. I've still got all my onions. So the goal will be to eventually plant something on both sides of the trellis. But because I haven't harvested these onions yet, and some of them are really close to the edge, there's just not a good amount of space there. So usually what I'll do is wait and then do a short season crop. So it's actually kind of good. I'm gonna end up succession planting cucumbers most likely. Because cucumbers, we end up with cucumber beetles really bad, so it's likely that by the time the other cucumbers are producing and doing well, I'll be ready to harvest the onions, and then once the onions are out, those cucumbers will start to succumb to the cucumber beetles. So I'll just put some new ones in the ground, and it's kind of the circle of life. We have enough time to get that done too. And then in this bed, these are the purple onions that I just planted, a week ago, and they're all popping up really nicely. And then also the personal melons that I've planted on this trellis look great. On the other side here, I have some melons as well that are all coming up. Something disturbed these seeds and kind of pushed them, so I've got some seeds coming up kind of off the trellis, but that'll be okay. So always a favorite. We have the lettuce bed. It is still going strong. So I get a lot of questions about lettuce in the summer. For us, we've never struggled with keeping lettuce through the summer. We do a lot of cut lettuce, which means we're not waiting for the lettuce to kind of grow and head up. Often in the summer, what you deal with is early bolting. So you want your lettuce to be in a place that you can keep it really wet, whether you have irrigation or if it's going to be shaded out by other crops. This bed is probably going to bolt and we're going to move our lettuce. So I put some lettuce on one of the back beds where it's going to be covered a little bit by the trellis. I think that that's going to be more successful overall. I think that this is probably not the best location for summer lettuce, but you can grow lettuce in the summer. So at this point, these brassica beds, they are just being ravished by the cabbage worms. It's unlikely that I get much of a harvest out of these. They're going to start bolting here soon anyways. So because these are going to start bolting soon anyways, and they have been so ravished by the cabbage worms, what I should have done is get on top of that sooner. I talked about this in the last video, but if you see a problem, address the problem as soon as you see it. It's the best way to help your garden survive. In this case, we've just had so much going on. I did see that we were having damage and I didn't get to it fast enough. So spraying BT definitely helps. It actually attacks the cabbage worms or any soft-bodied bug from the inside when they eat it. So it's not one of those like on contact, it's gonna kill them. But what it does do is it kills them when they eat when they eat more of the cabbage or the leaves of the brassicas, it will then kill them. So we've actually seen a lot of the damage stop since spraying that, but then we've gotten a lot of rain. So really what we would need to do is come back and spray again. Our temperatures are in the 90s right now. So highly unlikely that any of these, like the broccolis, the cauliflowers, the cabbage, if it hasn't already started to head up, it's really unlikely that it's going to. So what I'm probably gonna do is in the next week or so, pull both of these beds, we'll amend them with some compost, let them rest, and then I'll succession sow something. Usually I try to succession sow tomatoes. I have a lot of tomatoes this year, but I do have the tomatoes in the back bed that aren't doing very well, so I might do some of those. Sometimes I'll do zucchini and squash because we do deal with squash bugs so bad that it's good to succession sow those as well. If you live in a place where you have a long growing season, that's one of the best things that you can do is kind of stagger your plants. It also helps you in harvesting, right? A lot of times you end up in a situation where you have planted maybe like 4 or 5 zucchini plants and you plant them all at the same time. And what happens is you get into, late June, early July, and you're just harvesting so much zucchini that you can't even give it away. You have so much. But if you just plant one plant and then, 2 or 3 weeks before it starts fruiting, you plant another, what you're doing is you're succession sowing so that when that first plant ultimately succumbs to pest pressure or disease or just dies, you'll have another plant that's just starting to produce. So that's what it means to succession sow. And it's really great, especially if you have a long growing season, because those of us with long growing seasons generally deal with a lot of pest and disease pressure because we have that warm, muggy climate here in East Tennessee. It is just ideal for lots of fungus and lots of those lovely animals or bugs like squash beetles that just demolish plants. So vine borers, things like that we deal with. So if you can succession sow, you can kind of get ahead of that. And often, sometimes you get your best harvest when you're getting closer to fall. And the only way that you can actually still get a harvest in fall is if you plant them later, because they would have died from those pressures before if you didn't. So I want to walk over and see if we can see the bees. Look at the bees bearding up today. So we did go ahead and add a second box and also the honey super. They had filled out the original, so we added some more space and they look happy. Having bees in the garden is something that I've always dreamed about. I've always wanted to have a place that was pollinator friendly, not just in that I was planting lots of flowers and kind of intermixing that core value behind a potager garden, right? I've talked about this before, but I I call my garden a potager garden because it's a mix of annuals and perennials and flowers and fruits. And it's a place that's a true kitchen garden, but with the sustainability of being a kind of like an entry level dive into permaculture with my perennial herbs and some of the fruit trees and some of the perennial flowers that I have. So that's really a core of what the potager garden is. And with that, pollinators are so critical. I mean, they're critical in any garden, but I just had this vision of bees and butterflies just coexisting in this space with me where they have a place in my garden too. And so bringing bees into the space was really important for me. You know, there's so much value in helping to preserve the bee population, and that's not lost on me. So I'm so glad that we have the bees. We are doing our best to steward them well and to, you know, understand what their needs are. We've created this perfect little habitat for them where we're not mowing. We're letting a lot of the natural native grasses and clovers grow. And also we have that log, and we also have some water. Like, we're trying to create the perfect environment for them to thrive. And then it's right here next to my garden. So we get the dual benefit of them coming in and pollinating everything we have as well. Okay, one more thing I want to show you. Look at this eucalyptus. I started this eucalyptus from seed and honestly had low hopes. And look at it, it's just taken off. Now, eucalyptus is actually a tree. It's actually a tree, and it's perennial. Now, not in our zone. So my plan with this eucalyptus is actually to eventually move it. These strawberries will want more space and they'll kind of spread out. And I'm gonna move the eucalyptus into a container so I can bring it inside in the fall and winter and hopefully let it grow fairly big so that I can use the eucalyptus in different flower arrangements with some of the other cut flowers from my garden. And it just smells divine. So the final thing I want to show you all today is this passion vine. So I thought that this passion vine was dead. It came from my sweet friend Heather over at She Digs Farm. And I thought over the winter that it was just a goner. And look at it now. It's actually setting the first flowers, which if you've never seen a passion fruit flower, you are missing out. They are absolutely stunning. I can't wait to show them to you. And that brings us back to the front of the garden. There's still a lot to do. It's definitely not perfect by any means. Maybe one of these days I'll actually do a garden tour and have kind of cleaned up and finished all of the tasks in my garden that I had to do, but maybe not, and that'll be okay too. No matter what, I always want you to know that you have a space in my garden. Until next time.